bringing the people behind our food to life.
Today we're going to be making bread and butter pickles, and they are one of the easiest, most satisfying canned pickles to make because they are so simple. And you only need a few ingredients, but you want to make sure that you get the very best cucumbers that you can find. I like to shop at the farmers markets because I know that they're fresh and they're picked only a few hours before they come to market. And when you're choosing the pickles, you want to make sure that they are pickling cucumbers, nice and firm, and you want to make sure that they don't have a lot of blemishes in them. We're going to take those back to the sink and give them a good scrub with a vegetable brush, and then we'll slice them for the pickles. You're going to take off the end. We're going to discard this. What I like to do with the end of the cucumber, though, this little trick that I've learned from experience, is that every once in a while there's a cucumber that's a little bitter. And if you taste this end, you'll be able to weed out those cucumbers because, like, as the saying goes, one bad apple spoils the bunch. One bitter cucumber will also spoil your jar of pickles. So just give that a little taste as you go. It should taste sweet and good. Then we're going to slice the cucumbers into 1/4 to 1/2 inch slices, and the size really depends on how thick you like your pickles. So once you've gotten all the cucumbers sliced, you're going to go ahead and slice up the onion. And it doesn't matter if you use a sweet onion like a Vidalia or a Walla Walla or more of a savory onion. As long as you've got that onion flavor, that's what you're looking for. But nice 1/4 inch or so thick slices. My son especially likes the onions in these pickles. He likes to call them sippy pickles and eats them along with the cucumbers. So they give a lot of flavor to the cucumbers themselves, but they're also a really good pickle on their own. So then once you've got all your onions sliced, we're going to take our salt. It's a 1/2 cup of salt for the 5 pounds of pickles, and we'll give that a little stir in there, toss those together. And then we're going to add ice. And what the ice does is it adds water to the pickles, but it also helps to keep them nice and cold, which really crisps up the pickle. So we'll just give that a toss, nice clean hands in there. And we're going to let that sit and let the salt really get into those cucumbers in there. And that's going to season them, it's going to crisp them, and it's going to actually soften them a bit. So it sounds strange that they're softening and crisping, but the salt will get into the cells. It'll soften the cucumbers up a bit. They'll soak up that salt, and then that salt in there with the rest of the pickling process will really help to crisp up the pickles. So the recipe calls for this going in the refrigerator for 3 hours, but I don't have room in my refrigerator for a bowl this big. So I leave it on the counter in a nice cool spot. As long as the day's not too hot and your kitchen's not too hot, it's going to be just fine on the counter. Once these are salting and you've got 3 hours of time, it's a good time to go ahead and prepare your jars for canning. I've already taken the time to wash and rinse the jars thoroughly, and I put them into the canner covering them with water, and then I brought it up to a boil and boiled them for 10 minutes. And now I'm ready to take the jars out. So with the canners, they have these racks with these lifters that you can just lift up onto the sides of the pot. And then you're going to take this device, which really grips the jars. You don't want to use tongs. Tongs, even if they have the grip on them, they're not designed to hold the jars, so they will slip, and you could burn yourself pretty badly. So then we're going to lift these out and put them right on to a clean tray. And we're going to slip these into the oven. And the reason that we're going to do that is to dry them and also to keep them nice and hot while we start our pickles. And that way, when we go to put our pickles back in the jar, everything will be hot and ready to go. The next step to our bread and butter pickle chips is to make the pickling liquid, which we do by adding the apple cider vinegar to the pot. You want to use a non-reactive pot, and that way the acid from the vinegar doesn't create a metallic taste when it reacts with the pot. So I'm using an enameled cast iron. Stainless steel works as well. And then we're adding the sugar, and we're just going to give this a stir so that the sugar starts to dissolve in the vinegar. And once that begins to dissolve, we'll add our spices. And we've got yellow mustard seed, celery seed, and turmeric. The turmeric's going to give it that classic bread and butter pickle color. And then the celery seed and the mustard seed are going to add a lot of flavor. And once that's all combined together, we're going to rinse off our cucumbers that we've had salting. We're going to take our cucumbers and drain them in a colander, and then just give them a quick rinse. And if there are any big solid ice cubes, you want to remove those. And then we're just going to take our cucumbers and put them into our pickling liquid. And we'll bring this right to the stove. We'll turn the flame on high and give them a stir and let them come up to a simmer. And once that bubbles up again, we're going to shut the heat off and put them into the jars. So our jars are nice and hot out of the oven. We put our funnel over the top. Now once you get the pickles in there, you'll want to kind of shake the jar a little bit just to get them down into the jars a little flatter, because the tighter you pack the pickles, the less they'll be floating all around. So I can maybe fit one more pickle in there, and then I'll fill in the rest with the liquid. And I'm using a chopstick. It's wood, so you're not banging anything metal around onto the jar. And also you're not introducing any bacteria. You want to make sure that whatever you're using is nice and clean. So then I just topped it off up to a 1/2 inch. You want to give it a 1/2 inch head space, meaning there's a 1/2 inch between the top of the brine and the pickles and the top of the jar. Again, we're going to take a chopstick, and just to ensure that there's no air bubbles around the sides of the jar, you can stick that chopstick in there. They also make tools that are specifically designed for this, but a chopstick works just fine. And just go around the edge, and that way it'll release any air bubbles that are around the edge of the pickles and allow them to float up to the surface. We want to work quickly so that everything stays nice and hot. And at this point, we're going to take our flat lids and put them into the canner. The canner is still nice and hot from our sterilization. And that's going to heat these up, which will help them to seal. There we go. Then we'll take a nice, clean, wet towel, and we're going to wipe the edges of the jars. Now, these jars are very, very hot, and if this is too hot for you, you can always put on a pair of dishwashing gloves, or you can use another towel to hold the jar. But you want to make sure that that top is entirely clean of the sticky pickling liquid, and that will allow the flat lids to adhere to the top of the jar and will create a good seal. Next, we're going to put the flat lids on the jars. And we'll just place one on each jar. And we've got the rings nice and hot in the oven, and that will just help them to create a better seal on the jars. When you put on the bands, you want to make sure that they're fingertip tight. And what that means is that you screw them down until they're on all the way, but still really loose, and then give them one turn to seal them or secure them. Not so tight that you aren't able to take it back off easily, but tight enough that it is shut. Just like that. Then we're ready to put them in the canner. And we'll just place them in, lower it down, and process them in a boiling water bath for 10 minutes. And you start that timer as soon as it comes up to a boil. It's time to take the jars out of the canner. So we'll just lift these out. And you want to tip off the water right off the top. And if you're very, very careful and gentle, you can take a towel and just wipe off the excess liquid off the water off the top, and that will keep it from running down underneath the band as it cools. But you don't want to push it down so hard that you push the seal down on there. So then we just wait and listen for that very satisfying ping and know that they're sealed. And then let them sit for 24 hours undisturbed. And then you can check the seal the next day. This is what the top sounds like when it is not sealed. So you want to feel for that on the top, make sure that that divot is depressed. And then the second thing you need to do to check the seal is to actually lift the jar up by that flat lid. And when it's sealed, that won't come undone. And you can actually store it in your pantry without this ring. But if you do want to put it back on, just make sure you don't put it on too tightly. Those can stay in the pantry for a full year so that next year when cucumbers are in season, you'll be ready to do it again.
There's not a lot of people doing what we're doing because basically you have to have a real mechanical idea about it. It's just a simple larder thing, and so we have, accept the idea that we're not glamorous, but we're just doing something that I feel is essential for the food system to be regional.